You know that feeling, right? When you, or maybe someone you know, just promises way more than they can actually deliver.
Oh, yeah.
Could be a friend who's like always late for coffee, or maybe those huge political pledges you hear that just sort of vanish.
Happens all the time.
The simple thing, over-promising and under-delivering, it's actually this super common human paradox. You see it everywhere.
Absolutely.
So our mission today is a deep dive into exactly this phenomenon. We're going to try and unpack its roots, which seem, well, pretty deep.
Definitely.
We'll explore how it shows up across society, historically too, understand the consequences, which can be pretty big.
Right.
And this is the really interesting part for me, discover how artificial intelligence might actually help us understand it, maybe predict it, and possibly even counteract this whole cycle.
Yeah, the AI angle is fascinating.
And look, this isn't just about people, lacking integrity or something simple like that. It's much more complex.
It really is.
It's this interplay of how our brains are wired, our psychological tendencies, social dynamics, all that stuff. We'll be pulling in ideas from psychology, neuroscience, history, philosophy, even math, and of course, AI. So yeah, get ready for some potentially surprising facts and maybe a few aha moments along the way.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's dive in then. When we talk about overpromising, it's not always like intentional dishonesty, is it? My understanding is a lot of it is almost hardwired. Things like unrealistic optimism or the planning fallacy. Can you maybe walk us through what those actually mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Unrealistic optimism is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's this tendency we all kind of have to genuinely believe we can do more than is, realistically possible.
Right.
And the planning fallacy is tied right into that. It's our habit of just fundamentally underestimating how complex the task is, how much time it'll take, the costs, the risks, while at the same time, we overestimate the benefits. And what's really striking is this isn't just a few scattered people. The research shows it's incredibly consistent across different personalities, different kinds of tasks, even different cultures.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I'm definitely guilty of the planning fallacy, thinking I can clear my inbox in an hour? Never happens.
Exactly. We all do it. But then there's another layer, right?
Yeah, the people-pleasing thing.
That's it. That desire to please others, or maybe just avoid an awkward conversation, can lead us to say yes to things we know are probably unrealistic.
Even though deep down it's maybe not feasible.
Right. And the irony is it often backfires. You miss the deadline, the work is rushed, and you end up disappointing the very people you were trying to impress anyway.
Yeah, makes sense.
And here's a fascinating detail from the sources. Audiences, especially when looking at leaders or politicians, seem to actually reward those big, ambitious, maybe even over-the-top pledges. Yeah, it makes the more modest, maybe more realistic alternatives seem kind of less compelling, especially when things are competitive.
So hang on, we're kind of encouraging the very behavior that leads to disappointment later. That feels counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? It sets up this cycle. And then you add in things like escalation of commitment.
Or the sunk cost fallacy, sticking with a bad plan just because you've already put time or money into it.
Precisely. We make a public commitment, things start going wrong, but we stick with it because we need to feel consistent or justify our earlier decision. Sometimes observers even see that persistence as strong leadership, even if the decision itself is poor.
It feels like our brains are sometimes working against our own best interests. Does this societal feedback loop, rewarding the big promises, connect to how our brains are actually wired, maybe from a deeper, evolutionary standpoint?
Absolutely. You're hitting on the core paradox here.
Yeah.
What's really fascinating, and this goes beyond those immediate psychological biases, is how deeply embedded this tendency might be in our actual, biological design.
Our design. How so?
Well, think of the brain as this incredible prediction machine. It's constantly making guesses about the future, trying to minimize prediction error, the difference between what it expects and what actually happens.
Okay.
And key parts of the brain, like the prefrontal cortex for planning, the amygdala for emotion and risk, the basal ganglia for reward, they're all involved in this. And our emotional state, like feeling excited or happy, can seriously bias our decisions. It can make potential rewards seem way more valuable, pushing us towards riskier choices.
So it's not just a bug, it might actually be a feature. We're built to be a bit optimistic.
That's exactly the idea from evolutionary psychology. Biases like unrealistic optimism might have actually been design features that gave our ancestors an edge.
How? What kind of edge?
Think about it. That bias might have provided the courage, the motivation to try new, difficult things. Things where the potential payoff was huge, but maybe the immediate risks seemed high.
Like a risky hunt, maybe?
Exactly.
Yeah.
A hunter-gatherer contemplating a dangerous hunt. If they were purely realistic about the dangers, maybe they'd never take the chance. But that chance could mean feeding their family, their tribe. So a little extra optimism could be adaptive. And research backs this up to some extent. Studies suggest about a quarter of the variation we see in optimism levels between people might be genetic. In kids, they often show this natural hyper-optimism, almost ignoring negative results when they try something and nearly succeed.
Okay, so if it's partly genetic, partly a design feature, does that mean we're just stuck with it? Or is it more about learning to manage that tendency in today's world? Because that's the paradox you mentioned, right? What helped a hunter-gatherer might not be so great for, I don't know, managing a national budget.
You've nailed it. That's the modern mismatch. This optimism bias, while potentially adaptive for individual survival in simpler times, can become maladaptive in our incredibly complex modern societies. Think about huge infrastructure projects, global financial markets, political promises affecting millions. The potential costs of failure are massive, way beyond just one individual. Our old wiring isn't always suited for these new, complex challenges.
And that complexity itself probably adds to the problem, all the uncertainty.
Exactly. The inherent uncertainty in these complex human systems creates fertile ground. It allows for unintentional overpromising, stemming from that optimism bias we discussed, but it also opens the door for intentional deception.
Ah, okay. That's a really crucial distinction. So how do we tell the difference? What separates genuine, if misplaced, optimism from someone deliberately trying to mislead?
Well, deception, unlike just being overly optimistic, is an intentional act. It's about actively misleading someone.
Yeah.
And psychologically, that takes effort.
Effort. Like, it's hard work to lie.
It requires a high cognitive load, yeah. You have to construct the lie, maintain a convincing act, think about how the other person might react. It's mentally taxing.
Yeah.
And because of that effort, sometimes there's behavioral leakage.
Leakage. Like, tells.
Kind of. Subtle cues that might betray the person's true intent. Things like overly vague answers, maybe longer pauses than usual, sometimes even physical withdrawal, like leaning back.
Okay, so our brains might give us away, but where does AI fit into this? Can it actually help us spot the difference between someone being genuinely optimistic and someone, well, lying?
This is where AI gets really interesting and, frankly, powerful. Techniques like natural language processing, NLP, can analyze communication patterns.
What kind of patterns?
Things in speech or writing, like are they using fewer first-person pronouns, I, me, we?
Oh, yeah.
Is their language overly complex or maybe super vague? Are they using more negative emotion words? AI can pick up on these subtle linguistic markers.
And how good is it?
Some of the advanced models are getting remarkably accurate. Sources mention detection accuracy exceeding 99% in some tests for identifying manipulative language.
Wow. 99%.
Yeah. So this distinction is critical. AI could potentially help us differentiate between overpromising that comes from genuine, if unrealistic, hope versus calculated strategic deception. And knowing the difference allows for much more targeted, appropriate responses or interventions.
Okay, so we've looked inside at the biases, the wiring that makes us prone to overpromise. But what happens when these individual tendencies scale up? Let's zoom out now. How does this play out across society, maybe even shaping history?
Yeah, this is where it gets really impactful and sometimes quite sobering.
Take political leaders. They often use really compelling language, grand pledges, eradicate poverty, no new taxes, or promising specific tech breakthroughs like full self-driving cars by 2019.
We hear those all the time.
Right. And initially, as you said, they might get rewarded for that ambition. It generates excitement, maybe mobilizes support. But when those promises inevitably aren't met,
then comes the backlash.
Exactly. Widespread public disillusionment, a real sense of betrayal, and ultimately a serious erosion of trust in government and institutions.
And you see a similar pattern in the corporate world, especially tech sometimes.
The fake it till you make it culture.
Yeah, that can fuel a lot of overpromising. We've seen some pretty dramatic examples. Theranos is a big one. Elizabeth Holmes promising revolutionary blood tests from just a tiny pinprick.
Which led to her conviction for fraud.
Right. Or think about Elon Musk's predictions, like having 1 million robotaxis by 2020. These things create massive hype cycles. Sometimes the promise of future tech, like superintelligence, overshadows what's actually possible now.
And the result?
Depleted credibility, bad reviews, sometimes huge financial losses for the companies and their investors.
And it's not just the private sector. Public projects, especially big infrastructure ones, they seem notorious for this.
Absolutely. There's a long, well-documented history of systematic cost and schedule overruns. It often comes back to that planning fallacy we talked about earlier.
You mentioned some historical examples.
Yeah, look at the Erie Canal went 142% over budget. The Panama Canal, 106% over. These aren't new issues.
Wow. So this human blind spot has been derailing huge projects for centuries.
Pretty much. And more recently, Boston's Big famously ballooned from an initial estimate of $2.4 billion to over $14.6 billion. Even things like the initial rollout of the healthcare.gov website faced major delays and cost problems.
It seems like even organizations trying to do good, like nonprofits, can fall into this trap.
Unfortunately, yes. It might be less dramatic sometimes, maybe exaggerated claims about their impact to attract donors, but in severe cases, you see outright misuse of funds.
Like that Foundation for New Era Philanthropy.
Yeah, that turned out to be a massive Ponzi scheme, costing victims around $135 million back in the 90s. Or there were allegations about the American Red Cross and how donations were handled in Haiti after the earthquake.
And the consequence there is donor fatigue. People become cynical.
Exactly. It makes people hesitant to give, and that harms the vast majority of reputable organizations that are genuinely doing essential work. It's a real problem.
It really is sobering. Connecting this to the bigger picture, you said history offers some pretty stark warnings about where this can lead, even societal collapse.
It really does. If you look back, you can see patterns. Think about the Roman Republic. Its decline was partly fueled by promises about land reform that never materialized. This intensified inequality led to social unrest and ultimately contributed to the Republic falling apart. Later, Augustus actually used promise as peace, returned to rule of law to consolidate power.
And in other places.
Ancient China has a long history of peasant revolts, often sparked by broken government promises or failures. The sources mention late Qin dynasty peasants facing execution because rain made them miss a deadline.
Just because of rain.
Yeah. Or the Huangjin peasant revolt against corruption, heavy taxes, and drought. These kinds of broken promises often led to huge uprisings, even dynastic collapse.
Even ancient Egypt.
Yeah. The collapse of the Old Kingdom is linked partly to a sense that the cosmic order promised by the rulers had broken down, combined with famine from Nile failures and economic decline. And it's not just political promises. Think about unfulfilled prophecies throughout history, like the predictions about the world ending in 2012 based on the Maya calendar, or the Millerites in the 1840s expecting the return of Christ. When these things don't happen, it can cause real societal disruption and widespread disillusionment.
So it's not always about a sudden, dramatic collapse. It can be more like a slow chipping away at something fundamental.
That's a great way to put it. The cumulative effect of all these broken promises, especially from people in power, systematically erodes what sociologists call social capital.
Social capital. What's that exactly?
It's like the invisible infrastructure of a society that works. It's built on trust, shared norms, cooperation. Trust is the absolute cornerstone for healthy relationships, for business to function, for society to hang together.
And when that trust breaks down,
the social glue weakens. Cooperation decreases. Everything becomes more difficult and costly, and eventually you can see fragmentation and conflict. It undermines the very foundation we need for progress.
And this erosion of trust can be exploited, right? You mentioned deception and propaganda earlier.
Yes, and that's the really dark side. Leaders can strategically use lies and propaganda to manipulate people, creating an us versus them mentality, demonizing scapegoats, glorifying their own cause.
Like Nazi Germany.
That's a prime example. Their propaganda machine relentlessly depicted Germany as a victim to justify aggression and violence. They used euphemisms resettlement to hide the horrific reality of genocide.
And this often involves dehumanization.
Critically, yes.
Yeah.
Dehumanization means portraying a group as less than human. It's an incredibly powerful psychological tool because it essentially removes moral barriers. It primes people, makes it easier to justify, and ultimately facilitates terrible harm atrocities like genocide or ethnic cleansing.
It's the ultimate betrayal of trust, really.
It is. And historical accounts consistently show something else. A culture of silence. When individuals and communities don't speak out against the lies, against the dehumanization, it creates an environment where these atrocities become much more likely.
So Unchecked overpromising, especially when it tips into deliberate manipulation, can literally pave the way for the worst kinds of outcomes.
Directly. It shows how rhetoric and broken trust aren't just abstract concepts. They can have devastating real-world consequences.
So let's bring this back down to earth a bit. Beyond these huge historical events, what does this mean for you, for us, in our everyday lives? What are the real, tangible, maybe painful costs of this tendency to overpromise and underdeliver?
Well, the most immediate cost is usually that erosion of trust and credibility, just on a personal level.
Right, like in relationships.
Exactly. When trust is broken in a close relationship, maybe through infidelity or just repeated dishonesty, the emotional fallout is intense. Deep anger, anxiety, insecurity, sometimes obsessive thoughts about the betrayal. Rebuilding that trust, if it's even possible, is a long and incredibly painful process.
And in a business context, if a company overpromises,
It's a direct hit to their credibility. You get damaging negative reviews, bad word of mouth, people stop buying, clients leave, customer loyalty evaporates. Once your reputation is tarnished, attracting new customers becomes incredibly difficult.
yeah, reputation is everything.
It really is. And scaling up again, when you see widespread deception or unfulfilled promises from public figures, politicians, institutions, it really eats away at public trust. Trust in government, trust in experts, even trust between citizens. It fuels cynicism and undermines the whole democratic process. This politics of overpromise creates ongoing problems like budget deficits and encourages blame shifting instead of accountability. It damages the sort of ethical infrastructure of a nation.
Leading to that social fragmentation you mentioned.
Exactly. And the economic impacts are very real, too.
Like lost revenue for businesses.
Definitely. Disappointed customers just go elsewhere. For startups, especially, overpromising can lead to crazy valuations, maybe getting too much funding based on hype.
Which sounds good, but isn't.
Not necessarily. It can set them up for failure, jeopardize long-term success. When startups fail, investors lose capital, employees lose their jobs. In the public sector, as we saw, it means those systematic cost overruns, wasted resources, and often lower quality services for the public.
And what about the people inside organizations, the employees?
Huge impact there, too. When companies set unrealistic targets, constantly demand the impossible, fail to deliver on promises made to their employees, it leads to immense psychological distress.
Burnout.
Chronic stress, burnout, anxiety, depression, lower motivation, poorer performance, and inevitably higher employee turnover. It's a massive hidden cost.
And then there are potential legal and ethical consequences, right?
For sure. Companies can face lawsuits for fraudulent misrepresentation or false advertising if they seriously overstep. Individuals can face perjury charges if they lie under oath. And just ethically, it violates basic principles of honesty. That has a psychological cost for the individuals involved and damages the organization's brand.
It seems like the ripples spread incredibly wide, even into areas like how we raise kids or our health.
Yeah, it's surprising how far it reaches.
Mm-hmm.
Think about child development. Sometimes parents, out of a deep desire for their child to succeed, become overprotective. They might promise the child they can avoid all difficulty.
Trying to shield them.
Right. But paradoxically, that can lead to dependency, anxiety issues, and what some experts call a ridiculously low-risk appetite. The child doesn't learn resilience or how to cope with setbacks. Setting realistic expectations, letting kids experience manageable challenges is actually crucial for building confidence and healthy development.
That makes sense. And for our own health, mental and physical.
Unfulfilled promises, unmet expectations, they're major sources of psychological distress. That chronic workplace stress we just talked about. Huge contributor to burnout, anxiety, depression, and even on a societal level, when basic needs aren't met because of systemic failures or broken promises, think healthcare access, safe housing that increases mental health risks across the population.
Even our relationship with the environment isn't immune.
No. We see grand promises about environmental protection or tackling climate change that often fall short. That planning fallacy crops up again, underestimating the sheer complexity of environmental projects.
You mentioned an example from ancient China.
Yeah, the massive levees built on the Yellow River. They were intended to protect people, a kind of promise of safety. But the human overconfidence in their ability to totally control nature led to unintended consequences. The river silted up, the levees were breached, causing even more catastrophic floods downstream.
So our optimism, our belief we can control things, can backfire environmentally too.
It can. That optimism bias can lead us, collectively, to underestimate serious environmental risks, making us slower to act or less willing to make necessary changes.
Okay, wow. So this tendency is deeply rooted, widespread, and has some really significant, often hidden costs. Which brings us back to that burning question. In this world overflowing with information where overpromising seems almost endemic, can AI actually help? Can it be a tool for, understanding this better, maybe even intervening?
It's a huge question, and I think the potential is definitely there. AI can play a really transformative role. First, just in understanding and analysis.
How so? Like with predictive analytics?
Exactly. AI systems are great at crunching historical data to create much more accurate forecasts. For projects, they can estimate completion times more reliably, flag potential delays early on, help improve budgeting, basically fight against that planning fallacy with data.
And in other areas, like sales.
Yeah, in sales, AI can analyze huge amounts of data on customer behavior, identify subtle patterns that humans might miss, and generate more accurate sales pipeline predictions. Crucially, it can help remove some of the human bias, including that overconfidence or optimism bias from the forecasts.
Minimizing errors, basically.
Right. And then there's natural language processing, NLP, which we touched on earlier regarding deception detection.
Analyzing language patterns.
Yes. Looking for those markers, pronoun usage, vague language, negative emotion words to potentially spot manipulative communication. As we said, the accuracy is getting impressive. And think about legal contexts. NLP can analyze contracts incredibly quickly, extract key information, identify relevant clauses.
Cutting down on disputes, maybe?
Potentially, yes, by bringing clarity and highlighting potential issues much faster and more accurately than humans often can.
Okay, what about understanding behavior? Can AI model how we think?
This is a really advanced area, but yes, some AI models are now capable of predicting and simulating human thought and behavior with remarkable accuracy. They can act like virtual laboratories.
Or virtual labs.
Yeah, allowing researchers to test hypotheses about human cognition, about why we make certain decisions on a massive scale. Some models can even anticipate human choices in situations they were never specifically trained on. It's pretty cutting-edge stuff for understanding the why behind behaviors like overpromising.
Okay, so AI can help us understand and predict, but can it actually do anything? Can it help us mitigate the problem?
That's the next step. Moving towards AI-driven interventions. And there are several promising avenues.
Like helping us set better goals.
Exactly. AI tools can help refine goal management. They can help customize goals, check if we have the resources, make sure they're smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound.
The classic SMART goals.
Right. AI can automate tracking progress, send reminders, even help assign tasks. And in education, AI could potentially support teaching kids how to assess themselves realistically from a young age.
What about managing expectations, say, with customers?
AI-powered chatbots and virtual assistants are already doing this. They provide instant responses, 247, wrap questions efficiently. But they can also use sentiment analysis.
Detecting frustration.
Yeah, detecting customer sentiment and potentially flagging issues early, helping companies manage expectations proactively and avoid that under-delivery cycle, hopefully building trust.
And for those big projects that always seem to go off track.
AI can be a powerful monitoring tool. It can continuously track project metrics, milestone completion rates, how resources are being used, even team overtime hours to spot subtle signs of trouble, like timeline slippage or scope creep, much earlier than a human manager might.
Before things snowball.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
It might even suggest reallocating resources or trigger automated contingency plans. The idea is to shift project management from being reactive to proactive.
That sounds useful. What about nudging our behavior directly?
Yeah, personalized behavioral nudges are another interesting application. In healthcare, for instance, AI can analyze patient data to spot patterns of non-adherence to medication.
People not taking their pills.
Right, and then deliver personalized reminders or tailored messages to encourage them. In public health, you could have systems providing real-time nudges for things like hand hygiene in hospitals.
Little prompts to do the right thing.
Kind of. And AI-driven conversational agents, chatbots essentially, are even showing promise in mental health support, helping young adults manage stress or anxiety, perhaps related to unmet expectations.
It's amazing how much AI could potentially do in this space.
It really is. The potential applications are vast.
Yeah.
But, and this is a really big but.
There's always a but, the ethical side.
Exactly. While AI offers all this incredible promise, integrating it into systems that analyze and influence human behavior throws up some major ethical tightropes we absolutely have to navigate carefully.
Okay, that's crucial. What are the main things we need to be really careful about?
Well, number one is probably bias and fairness in the AI models themselves.
How does that happen?
AI learns from data. If the data used to train it reflects existing societal biases, maybe biases in hiring patterns, or racial biases in facial recognition data, the AI will learn and likely amplify those biases.
So it could actually make inequality worse.
Potentially, yes. So mitigation is key. We need diverse representative data sets. We need regular audits to check for fairness. We need transparency in how these systems work.
Which leads to transparency and accountability, right?
Absolutely. These AI systems, especially when they make important decisions, need to be explainable. We need to understand why they reached a certain conclusion. Without that transparency, it's incredibly hard to spot errors, correct biases, or even know who's responsible when things go wrong.
So human oversight is still critical.
Always. Especially in high-stakes areas like healthcare, finance, or justice. We can't just delegate crucial decisions entirely to a black box algorithm.
Makes sense. And data privacy. AI uses tons of data.
Huge amounts, often very sensitive personal data. So stringent privacy protections and robust security measures are absolutely non-negotiable. Things like strong encryption, clear consent protocols, anonymization where possible.
Okay. What about the impact on us, on humans? Our jobs, maybe even our ability to make our own judgments.
That's a really important concern. The impact on human agency and employment. There's a worry that over-relying on AI could diminish our own critical thinking skills or judgment.
Like we just blindly follow the algorithm.
There's some evidence suggesting that might happen. Studies have shown people might even lower their own moral standards slightly if they delegate a decision to an algorithm. And of course, there's the fear of job displacement as AI automates more tasks.
So the goal shouldn't be replacement.
Ideally, no. The goal should be to create AI systems that augment human capabilities, that free us up from tedious tasks to focus on more complex, creative, or empathetic work, rather than replacing human judgment entirely.
It all comes down to using AI responsibly then. AI for good.
That has to be the guiding principle. Ensuring these incredibly powerful technologies actually contribute to a more equitable, just, and fair society, and actively preventing their misuse for manipulation, discrimination, or causing harm. That requires clear ethical guidelines, ongoing public discussion, and collaboration across disciplines.
Okay, so we have these individual biases, these societal patterns, these massive consequences, and this powerful but potentially perilous tool in AI. Given all that, what can we actually do? As individuals, in our workplaces, as a society, how do we start breaking this cycle of overpromising and underdelivering?
It really has to happen on multiple levels, starting with ourselves, the individual.
Self-awareness.
Exactly. Fostering self-awareness about our own cognitive biases, recognizing our tendency towards optimism bias or the planning fallacy. A big part of that is learning from our past mistakes. When did we overpromise before? Why? And seeking objective feedback from others can be really helpful too, even if it's uncomfortable.
Getting an outside perspective.
Right. And for kids, teaching skills like self-reflection, how to set realistic goals, even how to give and receive constructive criticism from peers can build this awareness early on.
What else on the individual level? Resilience.
Definitely. Developing resilience and adaptability is key. Cultivating what Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset, seeing mistakes not as failures, but as learning opportunities. Encouraging perseverance, a positive attitude when facing challenges.
Not giving up when things get tough.
Exactly. For kids, this often means creating a supportive environment where they feel safe to try things, make mistakes, make choices, and learn from them. That builds independence and coping skills.
And being more careful about the promises we make in the first place.
Yes. Practicing mindful commitment before you say yes. Really pause. Visualize the steps involved. Maybe even list them out. Schedule them in your calendar. And crucially, add buffer time. Build in margin for errors, delays, the unexpected things that always crop up.
Underpromise and overdeliver. The classic advice.
It's classic for a reason. It's fundamentally about building trust. It's almost always better to manage expectations realistically up front.
Okay, so that's us as individuals. What about in our organizations, our communities?
There, it's really about fostering a culture of transparency and realistic expectations. Clear, consistent, honest communication has to be the priority.
Talking openly about what's possible.
Yes, and what's not possible. Providing regular updates on progress, and importantly, being open about challenges or setbacks when they happen. Leaders, especially, need to model this by acknowledging their own mistakes. That builds psychological safety and trust.
So it starts with leadership.
Leadership commitment is vital for building cultures of trust and accountability. Leaders have to walk the talk, demonstrate responsibility, follow through on their commitments, admit when they mess up. You need clear norms around meeting deadlines, owning mistakes, and celebrating accountability, not just rewarding unrealistic results achieved through burnout.
And what happens when trust is broken? Is there a way back?
Sometimes. Implementing principles of restorative justice can be powerful, especially in communities or even workplaces.
Restorative justice, how does that work?
Instead of just focusing on punishment, it focuses on repairing the harm caused. It typically involves bringing together the person who caused the harm, those who were harmed, and sometimes community members, to understand the impact and figure out a fair response that aims to restore relationships and social harmony. It draws on ideas found in many traditional justice systems, like some in Africa.
That sounds like a much more holistic approach than just blame.
It can be, when applied appropriately. It's about rebuilding that social fabric.
But how do we make these changes stick? How do we make this systemic across whole societies, maybe even globally? That seems like a huge leap.
It is a huge leap, but it's essential. At that broader societal and global level, ethical leadership and good governance are absolutely fundamental.
Choosing leaders with integrity.
Yes. Leaders who prioritize transparency, act in the public interest, and are genuinely committed to fulfilling promises. And we need robust accountability mechanisms, strong legal frameworks against misrepresentation, fraud, corruption, to act as a deterrent against deliberate deception by those in power.
And what about us as citizens? How do we navigate all the information, the claims, the promises?
Promoting critical media literacy is more important than ever. In this age of information overload and sometimes disinformation, we all need strong skills to tell truth from falsehood, to recognize manipulation tactics like propaganda.
Learning how to evaluate claims critically.
Exactly. Identifying biases, seeking out diverse sources, understanding how messages are framed. Education has a huge role to play in empowering people to be critical consumers of information, not just passive recipients.
And on the world stage. Between nations.
International cooperation and actually adhering to treaties and agreements are vital for global trust. We need mechanisms to hold nations accountable and address historical broken promises.
Like the unfulfilled treaties with Native American communities in the U.S.
That's a significant example, leading to ongoing disparities and deep mistrust. Or you can look at instances where nations have broken international agreements, damaging diplomatic relationships. Upholding commitments is crucial for stability.
And underlying all of this, you keep coming back to kids, healthy child development.
It sounds basic, but it truly is the foundation for a future society built on accountability and trust. It starts early, stimulating language skills, encouraging play, providing secure and loving care, teaching positive discipline. All these things build the groundwork.
And specifically related to promises.
Crucially, encouraging children to set realistic goals for themselves, helping them learn constructively from setbacks, and perhaps most importantly, modeling accountable behavior ourselves as adults. Kids learn so much by watching us. If they see us making excuses or breaking promises, that's what they'll learn is acceptable.
Wow, okay. We've covered a lot of ground here, from our internal biases to the global politics and the role of AI. What really stands out to you from this deep dive?
For me, it's seeing just how interconnected it all is. That this isn't just a simple moral failing like being lazy or dishonest, but often a predictable, almost inevitable outcome of how our brains evolve interacting with the pressures and incentives of modern society.
Right, not just bad intentions.
Often not. But also, critically, how those inherent biases can be deliberately exploited through strategic manipulation of information, especially by those in power, leading to really profound societal harm. That distinction feels key.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, it's seeing how AI emerges in this picture. It's this potentially powerful, maybe even transformative partner for understanding, analyzing, maybe even mitigating this really pervasive human challenge. The analytical power, the potential for precise interventions, it's kind of mind-blowing.
It is. But as we discussed, its deployment demands such rigorous ethical consideration. We have to grapple with bias, transparency, privacy, the impact on human agency. The absolute imperative is ensuring AI is developed and used responsibly, that it aligns with fairness, inclusivity, human dignity, and that we actively prevent it being weaponized for manipulation or harm.
So navigating this future of human promises, it really feels like it requires this huge collective effort. On our part as individuals, fostering that self-awareness, within organizations, promoting transparency and real accountability, and globally demanding ethical leadership and cultivating critical thinking.
Absolutely. Which leaves us with a pretty challenging thought, doesn't it? If our brains are kind of wired for optimism and our society often rewards the big, bold promises, even if they're unrealistic, What really motivates us to choose the harder path, to embrace that uncomfortable honesty that's needed for genuine long-term trust, especially now when AI might be getting better and better at exposing the truth anyway?
That is quite the question to ponder.
This is DigitView.